Hello and welcome back once again to another Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. This is Ben Blau, and today we are going to be talking about spatialized environmental sounds. I have this level set up, and I'd like to show you what I've got. This is nothing more than a hastily put together forest scene and a character that I set up. The character can walk and run, and that's it. Okay, that's all there is to this. And I started this out with the third-person template and imported that character, which is a character that I purchased, and retargeted some animations that I like onto it. So I made a fresh animation blueprint for this character called Rose. But if you notice when I play this and I pan my mouse around, if I'm looking or turning in different directions, the ambient sound that I have in there already, namely the wind and those birds, are just stereo 2D loops. So I'll pan around. It's a little boring, right? Because we don't have anything that is spatialized to create more realism. So I would like to add a little bit of that to this scene today and teach you some things that will allow you to implement your own versions of this. I'm going to do most of this scripting inside of our character blueprint, but there are other ways you could put it, in your game state, for example. But today we'll keep it simple and we're going to do it inside of BP_Rose. Before I get that far, I want to show you something else. Here in my content directory, I've got this folder imported audio, and I have a few folders here. One of them is called animals, crows, and bugs. So let's go into that. These are various things that we can use. Some of them are just beds that are looping. Crickets. I think that might be cicadas or something. That's just annoying. I've got some bees. I wanted to get more crow calls. Unfortunately, I only have 2. And I've got lots of wolves. Just howling. Okay, and some of them sound a little bit similar, but that's okay. Let's start out with creating a sound cue or a meta sound. In this case, it doesn't matter which you use, but I'm going to create a sound cue for simplicity out of, let's say, these 2 crow calls. So in order to do this, I'm going to simply left click on the first one and either shift click or control click, or if you're on a Macintosh, perhaps command click so I can select them both. And I can have a multi-selection. It just happens to be the case that I only have 2 crow samples. So I'm going to right click this and go all the way up to the very, very top where it says create single cue. So let's do that. I'll left click that option, and now I've got a brand new sound cue, and I don't feel the need to rename this because it's going to add the word cue to the end, and I'm completely fine with that. So let's open this up, and you can see what it's done already is that it has taken the 2 crow samples and just randomized them, so every time this plays, well, I guess in this case, it's probably just going to alternate because there's just 2 of them. So it would be ideal, of course, to have more than just 2. But for variety, why don't I put a few modulators at least in here and see if we can't improve this a little bit. So we'll use 3 of them, I think. And I'll have them standing by. For crows 1, that'll go through a modulator before it reaches the input pin of the random node. We'll do the same for the other crow sample. And then lastly, we'll put 1 after the random node before the final output. And you can set up the settings for those modulators any way you please in terms of volume modulation and pitch modulation. So every time I play this, it should be a little different. Okay, and of course we can exaggerate those if we want to. So we're going to now implement this cue in such a way that it happens randomly and in 3D around our player character. So let's go back out and we're going to locate our player character. I do have a player start in the level, so the character's not in the level yet. It's stored in the third person folder under blueprints, and right next to our default BP third person character, I have mine, which is BP underscore rows. So let's open up rows, and this doesn't contain very much. The only thing that I added to this was this part, which I guess I can comment, toggle, walk, run. That's all that is. Very, very simple. Just using the character movement component and setting the different speeds. And I have this in a blend space, so I know what speeds to use because I made the blend space in the first place. Toggling between walk and run. That's the only thing that I've changed about this character blueprint. Apart from if I go to the viewport, obviously, I have changed out the character mesh, and I'm using the animation blueprint that I created for this particular mesh. On a side note, this has nothing to do with sound, but you may have also noticed that I've got a couple of rect lights in this scene. And if we select one of them and we search for channel, I want to show you what I've done. I've disabled channel 0 and enabled channel 1 so that these lights only affect the character and not the world. The world by default is lit on channel 0, and I wanted to make sure that our character could be seen in the dark. So it's a rather dark scene, as you may recall, and when I do that, I like to have some lights on the character model so that it remains visible in the scene. So that's it. A couple of lights in the viewport and the toggle walk run, and that is all. So let's head back to the event graph right now. And we are ultimately going to want to start, and let me just clear out our search. And we're ultimately going to want to start with a custom event. So we'll type custom event. This is the one we want, add custom event. And of course we can name it whatever we want. Start crows, like that. And we will want to eventually play a sound. So play sound at location, because it's going to be a 3D sound. You could also use spawn sound at location, but in my opinion, it's not necessary. Play sound at location is sufficient for what we're about to do. For the time being, I'm going to remind you that we've already created this crows 1 cue. So if I have that selected in my content browser, I can go back to our rows blueprint and use the selected asset from content browser button. And I'll just pop that in there. So we're going to start the crows and play the sound at the location. And maybe we will delay a certain number of seconds. And I want that to be kind of unpredictable. So we can pull off of the duration pin and type random float in range. I'm sure you've done this before. Random float in range. And this is going to determine how often one of these crow calls is going to take place. So let's say maybe every 4 to 8 seconds. I don't know. That's just a guess. And after the delay completes, I want to bookend this custom event with itself. So we'll pull off of here and we'll type start crows. Here we go. Start crows. Call function start crows. Now, this is a custom event that is self-contained, and it also doesn't have a location pin yet, so we're going to return to that in a moment. But because this is a custom event that is self-contained, it has to be called someplace, and I think a good place to call it is on begin play. We already have event begin play doing some setup here in our character blueprint. So right here after add mapping context, I think what I will do is simply call that custom event start crows so that it will happen as soon as we enter play. Now, going back to the event, it does not have a location to play this sound. Oops, I think I selected the wrong one. The crow's cue, excuse me. Crow's cue. That's the one that I want to play. I've got a couple of sound cues that I've already made for this project, but I don't have a location and I do want this to spatialize. So I'm going to give it a location for the time being. And I want to remind you that the audio listener in the third-person character class is in fact not the capsule, not the character itself, but it's actually the follow camera. So I'm going to drag the follow camera into the graph and get its world location. So we'll pull off of here and type get world location. Now this is an important point because the follow camera is always ticking. And therefore, if I have a 3D sound, this is not fully set up yet, but if I have a 3D sound and I want to move my mouse around and hear it panning around us, if I were to use any other component that isn't ticking, like for example the capsule component is only ticking while the character is locomoting. So I'd be able to be walking and moving my mouse around and everything would spatialize correctly until I stop moving. And if I stop moving or walking and then look around, we would find that our sounds would no longer spatialize properly. So I'm preempting that by using the audio listener, which is the follow camera by default. So let's compile this and save this for the time being. And let's go back to the crow's sound cue. This is going to require some work in the details panel because what we want to do is override the attenuation. And I'm going to just make the inner radius a lot smaller, maybe something like 20, because I think there were mono samples and I want to be able to be sure that they appear as if they originate from a specific location. The fall off distance is probably excessive, so I'll set that to 2500. Just as an estimate, we can always go back to this. And then enable spatialization has to be set to true. If it isn't, you just set that to true. And we've got a choice here in terms of our spatialization method, and it defaults to panning. I would leave it at panning if you were listening to this over loudspeakers. However, you can render this binaurally. And if I choose binaural, I want to show you something in the project settings. That if I search spatialization, and I'm on a Windows computer right now, I've got this selected already, built-in spatialization. So it does have a built-in binaural impulse response that it convolves it through. This is not the best that there is to be had. For example, I could choose the resonance plugin, but that requires a little bit of extra setup. So I'm going to use basic built-in spatialization for now and go back to our sound cue. Now I am listening over headphones and I'm going to set this to binaural. Binaural will still render over loudspeakers, but it's best heard over headphones because it tries to simulate the effects of sound reflections off of the ridges of the pinnae, which are the outer parts of your ears that you can see on the sides of your head. Those play a role, believe it or not, in our ability to localize sound on the lateral and vertical plane. This is also true for your head and your shoulders and your torso. So sometimes that's referred to as a head-related transfer function is what it's called. So we'll be rendering this binaurally using the built-in spatializer today. And let me just look down and see if there's anything else I want to adjust for the time being. We can consider adding air absorption later if we want to. And I don't think I have to change anything else here, except maybe I'm considering overriding the concurrency because I don't want at any point a cacophony. I hate saying this, a cacophony of crows. It's sort of like a murder of crows. But anyway, A cacophony of crow sounds playing at the same time, and remember the concurrency defaults to 16 voices. So maybe I'll just set this to 2 or 3. I'll start with 3, and if it seems annoying, then we will set it down to 2. While I'm in this area, I will set the voice steal release time to something other than instantaneous, maybe about half a second, just so that if a new sound takes over, it doesn't abruptly cut off the outgoing sound if it happens to be the same crow's cue. All right, so let's save that and now go back to Rose's blueprint. So at this point, we've got the follow camera and its world location. We've populated play sound at location with the crow's cue, and we should be able to hear crows every so often. This is still not going to spatialize properly. We still have a few things to do, but let's test it at this stage and just make sure that we can hear the crows. I heard them there. I heard them again. They're very faint, so listen carefully. Okay, so I like how that's working. Here in Rose's blueprint, we are using the follow camera as the location for play sound at location. And I would like to have some more random things taking place here. So I'm going to temporarily disconnect the location pin and move this back. What I would like to do then is to split this struct so that I have access to all 3 axes, X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do the same thing on the location pin for play sound at location here. We're going to split the struct. And again, I've got access to all 3 of these. So again, I need to make a little bit of room because we're going to do a few things in between these. So here, off of the world location of the follow camera, off of the X pin, I'm going to search for an add node, ADD, add, just a regular operator. I will want one of these for all 3, so I can duplicate or copy and paste or search, whatever your preference is. And that can go into the A of each of one of these add pins. Now, into B, we are going to want to create a random float in range node. And I do recommend at first starting with a negative value for the minimum and a positive value for the maximum and have them be the same value for the time being. So let's do this one from, let's say, negative 400 to 400. And that is going to be added to all 3 of these. Now, I could plug these in at this point, like so, and we will get these crows spawning from different locations up to plus or minus 400 Unreal units away. Hopefully that will be loud enough to hear. So let's go into our level again. Very quiet. Now, interestingly, if we were to go into the attenuation override in the cue and increase the fall-off distance, maybe you can even picture it in your mind why this is true, but if I increase the fall-off distance to something like the default, which was 3600, they're going to get louder. because now we are technically occupying a location that is closer to the world location of the follow camera compared to the end of the fall off distance, the end of that radius, in other words, for this 3D sound. So that should make them a little bit easier to hear. They still sound a little bit far away, but that's okay. We can go back into our Rose blueprint, and we can simply change this random float in range to be smaller numbers. So let's go -300 to +300. And listen again. Okay, now this could also be just a matter of the overall volume of the sound cue. When I bounce my waves out of my digital audio workstation, I tend to bounce them out at pretty low levels so that I have room to increase their level without going into digital clipping. So let's increase the volume multiplier of the sound cue itself, maybe something like 3. Listen again. And I hope you can hear the fact that they are spatializing. I'll wait until a good one. Hopefully you heard that spatialize when I turned the camera. I'll try that again. You can hear where they're coming from. And they will rotate if I rotate my camera. Okay, so that's the main point, whether I'm locomoting or am standing still. So that increase in volume did in fact help. So let's go back into Rose and set that back to -400 and 400. And therefore, these are going to spawn sort of in a sphere around the origin of wherever the follow camera happens to be at the moment, as it follows the player around as it continues to tick and have its world location updated as we play. One risk with this system, however, is that given that the random float in range is between -400 and 400, some of the time what we can have happen is that when this sound cue fires, it may just by coincidence spawn much too close to the player. So I want to give sort of a little buffer, so to speak, so that it can never be too close to us. Maybe 50 units. So what we're going to need is yet another add node, operator add, and again we're going to need 3 of them, duplicate, duplicate. Now you could make a variable out of what I'm about to do, but I'm just going to hard code it in this case. So this is going to be for X. This is going to be for Y. And this is going to be for Z. And let's just say that I never want to get this within 50 units or so away from us, because it can really spawn anywhere within this range, and I don't ever want it to be super close because that would actually make it very, very loud. So let's just set this, I'm estimating, to 50. And that should give us a little bit of a buffer zone that protects us from it ever becoming too close. So let's compile and save this, and I'm going to return once more to the sound cue now. And just make sure that I agree with all of my attenuation choices. It might be fun to change the attenuation function from linear to something like inverse. Inverse is sort of an idealized model of how sound behaves in nature. This relates to something called the inverse square law, so that for every doubling of distance from the sound source, the sound level will drop by half. Binaural rendering, we don't have to adjust anything here. Maybe with air absorption. If they're farther away, we have this low-pass cutoff frequency. So their max distance from us, the max distance range, I think, what did we set? We set it to plus or minus 400, plus the 50. So we're going to go 450. Max distance range is going to be 450, and the minimum distance is going to be 50. And this will reduce the treble frequencies when the sound cue spawns farther away from us. Now, we can calculate this based on frequency and distance, but I'm just going to estimate. Let's set that to 7,000, and that's in hertz. You could say 7 kilohertz. And I'm not going to bother with the high pass function because since I made those sounds myself, I probably already high passed them, which I generally do, when I export them from my workstation in the first place. So I'll resave the sound cue and we'll go back into our level. This might be a good time to save all and test this out one more time. Okay, so let's hit play. Okay, I'm trying to show off the binaural panning here. Wait till one gets close enough to us. Come on. Okay, so maybe if I just stand still for a second, you'll hear what I'm talking about. Camera clipped with the tree, sorry about that. We can disable the collision trace on the camera boom. So you see, even when I'm standing still, that is panning around us because the camera is constantly ticking. And that's true whether I'm locomoting or not. Okay, so hopefully you heard it that time. Okay, so that's a good start, except for the fact that I have some other animals that I'd like to include, and we'll do something similar for, let's say, some wolves. So I'll go back into my imported audio folder. Fortunately, I have more wolves than crows. Let's see. That's a weird one. In fact, that one looks like it might be even the same as this. It actually isn't because they keep howling for longer. So I'm going to select all of these except for this one, which is a loop that I made. And again, right click, create a single cue, and we will open it up. This is the wolves cue. And I might as well do what I did before. For variety purposes, we can use a whole bunch of modulators. Okay, and I'll need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. So I'll just duplicate this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 will be for over here. Okay, so from here, we'll take the output of the random node through this modulator before it reaches the final output. I'm not going to bother straightening my wires right now, just in the interest of time. And we'll put each one of these through a modulator. And again, you can set the variance in terms of volume and pitch to your tastes. I'm not going to bother in this example. Hopefully we'll have good variety with these wolves. Heading there. Oh, that's going 2 places. What happened there? I should be going only to this modulator. There. Did I make too many? I might have, or I missed. Let's see. This one goes here. Boom, 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 boom. This modulator is for that wave player. One more. Okay, so it looks like I made one too many, so we'll just delete that one. And yeah, we can straighten those out later, but if I play the cue, okay, so let's set up the attenuation on this one again. Now, we could create an attenuation asset, and I usually do. After an override, I take note of what I liked, and then I make an attenuation asset out of that and use that when I create my sound classes and everything. But for now, we'll just override the attenuation. Volume attenuation, reduce this number. I generally like 2, so we'll go to 20. And spatialization is on. We can make that binaural as well. And not using reverb, at least not now. Concurrency, I'm going to want to override that. And let's say a max count of how many wolves? I'll start with 3 again. So no more than 3 can play at any given time. And for the voice steal release time, I'll make it in this case 0.75 seconds. So let's save. Okay, so this one is very similar to another. So I think I'll do on this particular one, maybe 0.8 to 0.85. Let's see what we think about that. Play the node. Okay, that helps. Almost sounds like a person, some of them do. Okay, so those are wolves. Now that we've got that sound cue, we can implement that in much the same way. In fact, we can copy and paste just about all of this, except for the custom events that we're going to have to recreate. So let's duplicate this. And it's already giving us the warning that these 2 custom events are invalid and already in use. So let's add another custom event. which we will call start wolves. And we are going to bookend it with itself, start wolves. And if you wanted to, you could make your random float and range different. Maybe I want to hear the wolves a little more frequently, so I can set that to every 3 seconds to maybe every 7 seconds. I could have left it the same, honestly, because remember, it is picking randomly. And just because it's picking a certain random float here doesn't mean that it's picking the same random float here. Play sound at location, notice that they both have the exact same cue, but I'm going to get my wolves cue for this one. Otherwise, they're both playing crows or wolf. Let me see, what do I call it? Wolf howl cue. Okay, so that's highlighted. So I should just be able to pop it in there. Great. Compile and save. And now I've got to call it. So right after I'm calling start crows, I can start the wolves off of begin play. So let's hear some wolves, hopefully off in the distance. Oh yeah, the wolves are much easier to hear binaurally panning. Okay, so I think that the wolves are howling too often, so what we can do is we can just script the random float and range differently. So let's say from every 4 seconds to every 9 seconds, or maybe every 5 seconds to every 9 seconds, or 8. I don't know. It's trial and error when it comes to that and how it sounds. The wolf cue could be a little louder, I think. So let's just turn that up a bit. Set that to 1.5. And I think that the crows now are a little too loud, so I will turn those down. I think I really cranked them up. So let's set that to 2 and see how that is. Yeah, the wolves are now too loud, so I turned them up too much. Let's go back down to 1. Remember, it started at 0.75. 1 might be enough. We can also increase the range for the wolves. In Rose's blueprint here, we can change the random float and range from, let's say, minus 500 to 500. So they can be farther away from us. There you go. Okay, so I think that's coming together nicely. I wonder if I enabled air attenuation on the wolves. Let's see. Air absorption. Enable that, and I'll set the distance range. Minimum distance is going to be 50, and the maximum distance is going to be 550, I do believe. And again, I'll reduce the treble when they're farther away. Maybe set that to 6K. See what that sounds like. Yeah, I'd probably have to start at a lower frequency for that to make much of a meaningful difference. All right, so far so good. What else do I have here in terms of animals? I got crows, I got wolves. Now these bees and all of these different beds here, I think I meant for those to be loops. So sort of different zones. It might be interesting to make the crickets, which are bed 3. I think I'm going to open that one up and just check if it's looping, and it's not. So let's set that to looping and save it that way. And while I'm here, for all of the other ones that are meant to be loops, I'm going to do the same thing. So looping, set to true for all these beds. Looping, set to true. I could have done this in the property matrix, right? But you may not know about that, but it's a good thing to learn about if you're new to Unreal. It can save you a lot of time and edit several things at once. Bees loop next. Set that to looping. Save. Looping is already set on that one. And bees 3 looping. Okay. So, and it opens each one, of course, as you click them. So you don't have to keep the tabs open necessarily. For all of these sounds. And we're done with the crows anyway. So project settings can stay and rows can stay. All right, let's do a save all because I just changed a whole lot of stuff. So let's make a sound cue out of this one. Create cue. And I'm going to call this crickets underscore cue. We'll open that up and I'll override the attenuation and we will make sure enable spatialization is checked. And again, since I'm wearing headphones, I'm going to set this to binaural panning and make the inner radius smaller. And let's see. This is just one sample, so I don't have to randomize anything or modulate anything. So yeah, this is probably just fine as it is. Save. And the crickets queue, I can go back to rows and we can make a custom event. Start crickets. And that will be play sound at location. I think I still have that one highlighted, so I can pop it in there. That worked well. These are just going to loop, so we just need a location for them. And let's use the follow camera's world location for that. So we'll get the follow camera and the world location, copy and paste down here. And I could probably just recombine the struct and plug that directly in here. I'm wondering if I want to do that explicitly or not, or if I wanted to increase the distance in some way. So I could do an add. I think I've done this before. Interesting thing is that when you do add off of a location vector, I think that I can specify a float value by using make literal float. We might have to untick context sensitive for that. And that will scale all three by the same amount. So we will determine how far away these crickets are going to sound. And let's say 300 units just to start. These should just continue until we exit play. So let's go back up here and start the crickets. And we'll see if we'll need to adjust their playback volume. Yeah, I don't hear them at all. So let's go back into rows and reduce their distance to something more like 50. Compile and save and see if that helps. Oh, you know what? I think I know what I did wrong. In the crickets queue, I wonder if I set the wave player to loop. I bet I didn't. Aha. That's at least part of the story. I know I made the wave assets loop, but not necessarily the wave player. And now we have crickets. And I do think that they're too loud, so I can adjust that here in the play sound at location. My volume multiplier, I can set that to 0.55. Just an estimate. I'd like that to be even quieter, maybe 0.35 for our crickets. So I'm going to exit play one more time, and I want you to listen now just to the wind. The wind is a stereo bed that's playing as a 2D sound, and that's not particularly dynamic. So listen specifically to that aspect of our soundscape. Yeah, the wind isn't really changing. I mean, I do like it, but most of the time people implement wind as just this sort of 2D layer of wind on top of everything. But we have other loops here. Yeah, we'll use those later. I think I've got them in another folder. It's in audio ambience, wind. Okay, so let's see. Already made a cue from that. Looks like I have a few variations on it. Okay, this one sounds kind of good to me, so I'm going to double click that and just look at a few things. Let's make sure that we override the attenuation on this. And 3600, we'll have to see it in the level because I want these to get close to overlapping by a small amount. Okay, and that should be a seamless loop. Let me just make sure that the wave player is set to loop. And it is. Okay, so we're going to use this directly in the level. Okay, we're going to use this directly in the level. And I can see where my player start is. And I'm going to want to just place this in different locations in such a way that I can see their attenuation radii. So I press the letter G, and therefore I can see it. The inner radius, I can edit inner radius is adjustable. And the outer radius is adjustable. So what I can do is I could scatter these throughout the world. I'm going to Alt drag and just have multiple instances of them, because all of them are 3D sounds. We overrode the attenuation. Move this one over a little bit. Let me highlight all of them, see if we can see them all at the same time. And where is our player start in relationship to that? Okay, so let's see if we can perceive directional wind, especially as we get closer to certain sources. I can hear the wind panning. It's that whistling that I'm listening for. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I think that maybe that cue itself could be a tiny, tiny bit louder. 1.125. Save. Also, what I would recommend is to start those off programmatically. Perhaps what you could do is, for this little area of woods, is you could make one or more collision volumes that are around the area emitters, and you can start and stop them that way, especially if they are themselves encased inside of blueprints, which I would recommend, because we don't need those sounds playing when we're not in this area. So let's do maybe one more thing, and we'll go back to content. Yeah, these actually might be fun. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to make cues out of, I think, maybe all of these. Create multiple cues. Save them. And I am going to open each one just to make sure that the wave players are looping. So there's that one. Save. There's that one. A wave player looping. Save. There's that one. It'd be good if it was like a swamp in this environment. Wave player looping. Save. Bed 4, wave player, looping was already that way. Bed 5, wave player, looping was already set. And like the other sound cues, if you look at them in the level, you'll be able to see their attenuation radii. And if you override the attenuation, which you can do, by the way, in the details panel, as long as you click override attenuation, you'll be able to see where they are and how they may or may not overlap. So our player start, we know where that is. And let me just place some of these different beds in different locations in the world. We'll put one there. Override attenuation. Okay, that will allow me to see it. So let's move that this way. And let's take our next bed, put it over there. Override attenuation. Zoom out even further. This bed, drop it over there, override the attenuation. Bed 4, I'm not in love with. And bed 5, I'm not in love with because we already have crickets. So let me get bed 4 out of there. And let's see, where's bed 1? Bed 1 could be used in more than one place. Let's put another one. I'm holding down Alt I'll put one over there. Where's bed 2? It's over here. I'll put one up here. Where is bed 3? It's up there. Okay, this one I think could be overlapping a little bit more. So we'll pull that in. You can hear this croaking sound. As I get farther away from it, it's going to attenuate until I get next to or closer to another audio volume that has different sounds playing. Okay, so of course I could go back in there and space these around a little bit better now that I can hear them. One thing to remember is that all of this consumes memory, and we don't want this playing all of the time when we can't hear it. So again, the environmental stuff, I would put them inside of blueprints that can be activated when you enter a certain region and then unloaded from memory when you exit that region when they no longer need to be heard. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something, and thank you for being with me once again for this episode. I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.